Well, good morning. Have you ever noticed when you are struggling with a decision that when you finally make a choice, the things just start to fall into line? They just start to happen and get that momentum that we were been talking about this morning. I love that segue. Thank you guys. Yeah, Henry David Thoreau addressed this in the mid 1800s when he said, as we begin to walk in the direction of a life beyond what we can even imagine now, unseen laws come into place. So, my talk today is willing or willful. Willing or willful. And we're going to be looking at two things. One, we're going to look at how much we really trust Source, Spirit, as our source. How much do we really trust that? And then we're also going to look at a spiritual practice that will help us to trust more, or perhaps develop trust in the first place, or heal some issues that where we may have trust situations. You ready? Yes. All right. So most of us probably do trust the infinite intelligence, source energy, God, whatever name you call it. Most of us probably do trust that most of the time, yes? I'm going to suggest that we frequently don't. Anybody ever worry? Anybody ever have regrets? Anybody ever do a prayer treatment and then sit down and begin planning out exactly how it's going to happen? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. These are all actions that insert doubt and deny our willingness. And they actually demonstrate our willfulness, and our distrust of Source. Subtle, but it's there. It's there. For me, I call it my 2-year-old. I'll do it myself. Anybody ever seen a 2-year-old and a little tantrum? They're going to be independent and do that themselves? Yeah. Now, trusting an invisible source can be challenging for us. We're spiritual beings, yes, but we live in this world of physicality that's always getting our attention and telling us that we must be in charge. Every motivational speaker out there has an underlying message that says, if it's meant to be, it's thank you. Come on, y'all know this. It's up to me. That's the message. That's what they do for us, is they motivate us to take charge of our lives. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. In the world of effects, that can be a good thing. But we're talking about the spiritual realm. We're talking about our relationship with the divine, with God itself, the infinite intelligence and energy of the universes, bigger than we can imagine. That's the relationship we're talking about. So, how can we let go and build our trust and faith in this invisible source without appearing to be totally whacked in the real world? The spiritual practices that we teach in religious science and our centers for spiritual living are all part of the process of our journey through this experience of our physical lives at this time. To get in touch with and to understand this great I am that resides within each one. Ernest Holmes is the author of The Science of Mind, which is the philosophy that we teach from. He's also the founder of our Centers for Spiritual Living. And he said, we do not will this presence into existence, nor do we by declaration, affirmation, or demand command it. We do not court it through a false humility, nor engage its attention by admiration. The presence, the power is already right here. It is willingness, acceptance, and recognition that give entrance to the divine presence into our lives. It's faith and acknowledgement which permit its creative power to flow through our word. Willingness, acceptance, and recognition. open the doorway for Spirit to come into our experience in greater ways so that we can begin to live in that grace that we talk about. Now, Jesus said something similar. He said of the Father, he said, I stand at the door. The Father says, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone here answers, I'll come in. Spirit doesn't force itself on us. We have been given choice. We've been given freedom. We've been given everything that we need. We've been given a set of laws and rules in which to live that apply to everybody exactly the same. And we've come here to find and reveal our own divinity for ourselves, to be an expression of Spirit. That's what we've come to do, is to find that within us and let that be revealed. Many of us might classify ourselves or be classified by others as control freaks, recovering or otherwise, right? Or practicing. So being willing to surrender that and say, yes, I'm going to release and let go. We sing it every week. I'm going to release and let go. It's not always easy, is it? We like to be in control. We like to be in charge of our destiny. It's up to me after all, right? So the times that it's usually not challenging for us is when something has happened in our lives. Something negative has impacted us. When there's a crisis, a diagnosis, a health challenge, a financial disaster, or some other type of loss or fear that begins to appear in our lives. Those are the times that we feel compelled to reach out of that darkness to find the light, to find the support, to find something, a life preserver in the chaos. Those are the times that it's easy for us. Would you agree? So my question is, why do we need a crisis in order to pray and trust that Spirit will help us? What if we could teach ourselves how to surrender to God's grace, guidance, and protection every day, all day long? How would our lives change? To know, if you walked through the world knowing that you were living in God's grace, guidance, and protection every day, would you feel different as you move about your world? Yeah. As I said, the spiritual practices that we teach in our Centers for Spiritual Living are all part of this process for us. And today I want to talk about the spiritual practice of tithing. Notice what your thoughts just went to. How'd you feel it in your body? Tithing. Oh no, she's going to talk about money. Okay, let's change it and let's say committed giving. Is that better? Grateful giving. How about that? Grateful giving. You see, it doesn't really matter what you call the practice. It's what works for you. It's sort of like when we name off the multitude of names for Spirit, for God. It doesn't matter what we call it as long as we know it, right? It doesn't matter what we call it. We get caught up in semantics and words sometimes. And it's more about the practice. It's more about the beingness of it. So in the science of mind, we teach something called the law of circulation, and it's a universal reciprocal relationship between giving and receiving. Not two things. They're one thing on a continuum, on a circle. Circulation, circle, okay? And when we give something away, a vacuum is created. If I've got two things and I give one away, I've only got one, and there's a vacuum where that space was being taken up, right? So now there's a vacuum. Aristotle said nature abhors a vacuum. Now, this was like 300 BC. The Bible says, give and it shall be given to you. In other words, the vacuum shall be filled, right? The vacuum shall be filled. When we give of our time, talent, and treasure, the vacuum left is then replenished with more time, talent, and treasure. Does that make sense? It's kind of logical when you think about it. So now we have religion, philosophy, and science all in agreement about this law. It is our willingness to give what we seek that keeps the abundance of the universe circulating. Our willingness to give what we seek and to not hoard it. If I want more love in my life, I can't sit back and go, somebody better love me, right? I have to first be love. I have to give my love away in order for that to come back and fill. I've got a closed position. I got no room for love unless I'm giving it away, giving some of it away. The same is true with peace, with joy, with finances, with creative talents and expressions. If I've got a bucket full of talent, Joe, I'm going to use you because you're just really talented. Joe gives his talent away all the time. He's giving so much to this center all the time, and I appreciate you. Joe's been with me since almost day one, so I really appreciate the gift that he is to this community and the talents that he's got. And I know many of us in this room have been helped with things like, my computer's got a problem. Joe, what do I do? I mean, just little things like that. So he's making room for more of that talent to come through him. And we've got our Gourmet for God coming up that he's hosting. He created that group, the Outcasters. It's his company he created. And he's taught and trained all these people how to do this. So make sure you get your tickets. It's going to be really cool. Anyway. So it's about circulation. It's about giving so that we receive and give and allowing the good to flow. Allowing the good to flow. We heard this morning about Taylor Swift's generosity. Last week, we heard about those students at West Virginia University and the dean who were so generous in collecting money for the barista, or the manager, I guess she was, at Starbucks. And February, Michael Jordan, great basketball player, right? He celebrated his 60th birthday with a $10 million donation to Make-A-Wish Foundation. These are celebrities. They're very rich celebrities. But it's all relative, isn't it? They earn big and they give big. They earn big and they give big. This law works whether it's $1 or $1 million or $1 billion. This law works. But we don't give to get. That's sometimes, we can get that wrapped up in our minds sometimes. Well, I'll give because if I don't, then I'm not going to get anything. It's not exactly the way it works. That is the energy that's based in fear and lack. So be careful of that if those thoughts come up. We give because we have faith and trust in our source, because we understand the law and the working of the law. We understand the replenishment of circulation. Fortunately, the science of mind teaches us how to use this universal law in our lives. And of all of our practices, the integration of our money and our spirituality seems to be the most challenging for many of us. There's a separation in our minds about that. It's money's in the physical realm and everything else is in the spiritual realm. And it's not so. Everything's one. So that's all in the spiritual realm as well. So we need to remember that when everything we have in our money that we earn, that we share, that we give, all of this is a demonstration of our spiritual presence on planet Earth. It's a demonstration of our mindset, of our consciousness. Ernest Holmes says that spirit is substance and substance is supply. Spirit is substance, substance is supply. It is right that we should be successful, for otherwise the spirit is not expressed. That's what we've come here to do, is to express spirit, to allow it to be expressed through us. Do you believe that God is absolutely opulent? Absolutely, right? So why would we not be? Why would we not live that life as well? There is an underlying unity in all of life. Would you agree? Yes. Underlying unity in all of life. And no one, therefore, lives only to themselves. We're all part of this whole. It's a whole system that we're all a part of. So we all participate in this idea of circulation. When you receive money, do you ask, how can I use this money to create a difference in the world? Or are we more concerned with, how am I going to get my bills paid this month? Been there. Absolutely. Will you give to your spiritual community to support its sharing this teaching in the world so it can continue to support you in your growth and expansion? Are there other ways to give besides financially? Of course. Give of your time and your talent to the community, to your community at large, outside these doors? Absolutely. When we talk about tithing and the hows of tithing, two questions usually come up. The first one is, do I tithe before taxes or after? Right? Do I tithe before taxes or after? Edwin Gaines has a whole thing on that. But mine, my personal choice, is that I tithe on my net. I tithe on my net and any refunds or anything that I might get also. And if you think back, if you're a Bible studier, render unto Caesar's that which is Caesar. Render unto God that which is God's. And so it's like, okay, here comes this, and this has to happen, so that's going to happen, and then the rest is there. So that's a personal choice that I've made, and you can choose however you want. Edwin's position is, well, do you want to take a discount in your filling of the vacuum, or do you want the biggest filling of the vacuum you can get? So do it on the gross. I just chose differently. So you get to choose how you want to do this. The second question is very similar to the first. And do I give on the net after I pay my bills? After I pay my bills. Buy food, gas, shelter, the necessities of life. What about my savings and my investments? For me, I choose to give on my net before I pay anything. I tithe to my spirituality first. That's where I start. That comes off the top. And then everything else gets paid. When I first started, I was tithing on the leftovers. And that didn't feel quite right to me. It didn't feel like I was living in integrity with my own divinity. And frankly, there was not a lot left over. But since I've made that change, and since I make a conscientious plan that I tithe on that net amount that comes to me first, there's always seemed to be enough and more. There always seems to be enough and more. So these are personal decisions that only you can make when you create your conscious giving plan. You get to decide. And it's interesting, as I was driving up here this morning, I thought, what is the point of this message? And the real point of this message is to understand that this law of circulation, these laws of prosperity, work for us when we work within them. It's really not about tithing to this community. We appreciate your tithes. We really do. It keeps our doors open. It keeps our ministry out into the world. So we really appreciate that. But it's really about you and your prosperity and you living the best life you can live through practicing these principles, through understanding that everything that's coming into you is for your circulation. It comes in, and you're going to use part of that money to pay for your power and your water, all the things you pay for. You're receiving services, and you're circulating back money for those service providers. They then circulate that out to keep all those systems running and to pay their staff. That money then gets circulated out again for college educations, for health coverage, for all sorts of things. So it's all this big circulation that we live in, that whole that we were talking about, that unified whole in which we live. So doing our part, right? That's really what we're doing, is doing our part and doing it consciously. Doing it consciously. Making a decision. So the spiritual principle of tithing 10%. Anybody heard that? Tithe 10%. It's a biblical thing. It's an easy number. Most of us can figure 10% top of our head, right? It's an easy way to calculate. But it's a spiritual practice that does have amazing results when you commit to it and do it. I speak from experience and what I have seen in my own life and what I've seen in lives of others who have taken on a practice. It's a practice that will help you break through limiting beliefs. That's the key. It helps us break through limiting beliefs because we're willing to begin to trust Spirit in a larger way. We're trusting Spirit with our money, for goodness sake, right? We trust in a bigger way. Tithing is a practice of faith and trust. If you are ready to break through your limitations and step into spiritual practices, I invite you to take this into your week. Think about it. Pray about it. Daniel and Reverend Lee and I are available for deeper conversation, counseling around these prosperity principles, around a tithing plan or practice should you need help. Or if you get into it and you run up against the fear wall, I would be willing to bet my tithers in the room have hit a fear wall at some point in their tithing practice. It happens. Know it's coming. And that's when we build our faith. That's when we build our trust, as we walk through that fear and do it anyway. And do it anyway. So if you'd like more information about this practice and to grow in faith and your prosperity, I invite you to sign up for our Mindful Monday newsletter. It comes out on Mondays. It'll have these practices I'm going to give you in just a minute, as well as a recap of this talk. You can then use this in your week and use it to embody and apply these principles in your life. So number one, you're practicing the principles, is an affirmation. I forgot to give Joe the first part. I live in God's grace, guidance, and protection. I live in God's grace, guidance, and protection. Let's say that together. I live in God's grace, guidance, and protection. Write that on sticky notes and put it everywhere. Say it all day long. Make it a mantra. Say it as soon as you wake up in the morning. Say it as you're drifting off to sleep at night. And then document, make note of what happens during the day for you as you're using this, as you're beginning to embody this idea. Number two, start or evaluate your committed giving practice. If you are not currently a committed giver, take this practice into prayer, meditation and determine the amount you're comfortable committing to. I recommend at least 3 to 5% to start. It needs to be noticed, not just some small amount that's fluff that you're not going to notice. It needs to be noticed, noticeable, but not to the point of hurting your budget and stuff, right? But it needs to be noticeable. And then knowing that you'll be building that up to 10% over time. Make this an identifiable gift where you are making a cash contribution. Use the envelopes, and you can pay by check or credit card. We have Zelle available if you'd like to do that. You can also do a tax-free contribution through your IRA. Some of us have required minimum distributions, and you can make a direct contribution out of your IRA to your spiritual center, and there's no tax taken out for you. You don't have to pay tax on that distribution. So that's another way that you can contribute. So there's lots of ways. Talk to Daniel. He understands that really well. You can enroll in our Stewards program if you want to make this reoccurring. We have that on our website, and you're offered the opportunity to make it reoccurring. And that way it comes out on a regular basis. And then on Sundays, you have the tithe ticket that reminds you of what you're doing and honors your committed giving plan, and that you can focus on that is what you are doing. And you determine the frequency. It can be at least once a month, or you can break it up by pay periods or each week on Sundays. However you choose, it's your plan. This is a commitment. And it's a commitment to yourself and your own prosperity. It's a commitment to you and your growth in your faith. I will make a pledge to you this morning. If you will commit to this practice, to become a committed tither, a giver to this community for the next 90 days, and if at the end of that 90 days you do not see this law active in your life, I will refund your money. There are forms in the front desk that you'll need to complete in order to participate in this program. So grab one of those if you want to participate in that and try that. Money back guarantee. And let me know. For those who are currently committed givers, whether you're an auto tither or you just give every month or every week or however you do, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are so blessed by your contribution, by your commitment, and I claim for you that you see this in your life demonstrated, pressed down to overflowing. As part of the season of giving, I invite you to take a look at what you're currently giving. Is it time for an adjustment, perhaps? Most of us get a cost of living raise every year. Does your tithe get a cost of living increase? If you're giving by credit card, consider increasing that amount by the amount of the merchant fees. That option's offered to you when you pay online. You can add the amount of the merchant fees. That then allows your entire tithe to come to the community because we don't have to pay those fees. You've paid them in advance. The same is true with Zelle. We have Zelle now available. That is a direct cash contribution, and there are no fees on that one either. So your entire donation goes to the center. So lots of things we can do on increasing our prosperity awareness and consciousness. Little things make a big difference. Little things make a big difference in this. So making a commitment to giving to your spiritual community is a sacred spiritual practice. It's not something that I take lightly, or I would invite you to take lightly. I invite you to take this to prayer and meditation and to really consider consciously what it is you want to do and commit to, and then commit to it. You know, giving whatever's left in the bottom of our purses or pockets is fine. And when it's a committed program and you know what you're giving and you plan for it, something happens. Something happens within our own consciousness and begins to expand. So I invite you to step into that practice. Give it a try. You got a money back guarantee. So we'll close with a quick quote by Ernest, who says, "Life is ever giving of itself. We must receive, utilize, and extend the gift." And so it is. And now it's your turn. Any questions? You have a question?
Kinda.
Kinda?
I have a comment.
A comment. Comments are good.
Okay, so my best friend has 7 children.
Mm-hmm.
She homeschooled all of her children, and so the only one working was her husband.
Mm-hmm.
they always tithed. And I heard her say so many times, God provides.
Mm-hmm.
If there was something I needed, it showed up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of stories like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's a great one, though. Thank you.
Yeah. You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Mary Morrissey has a story like that. She had, I think, 3 or 4 kids, and they were down. She was down to her last $2 and tithed 20 cents and used the 180 to go and buy groceries for the family. And then someone, I don't remember the whole story, but some windfall came to her that evening. So you just never know how it's going to work.
I don't really have a question, but what you said today, so I've held for a long time, or some of my struggles have been with money,
Mm-hmm.
right? And held very limiting beliefs around that. And the message today was really interesting because I decided to do 2 things, partly from the class that we've been Thursday nights, but they've been on my mind for a while. And so I made a decision to invest more money for later in life. And that's scary because it comes out, right? And then I made the decision last week to tithe 10% of my paycheck to, whatever. And as I was driving to the bank this morning, I went and got my dad and I coffee, and I was driving the bank, and my head was telling me, well, how can you make this less? Why are you doing this? Are you going to, and it was just going through like all of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where, I guess for me, it's a way to trust, right? I don't know if I'm there. I can't admittedly say that I completely trust,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm giving it a shot.
Good.
So
Stay with it. Those thoughts, that's the fear coming up. So stay with it. Good for you. Good for you. You're building your faith muscle. Who else? Alexander. Oops.
Young lady in the back, go first.
Miss Beverly.
I don't really have a question either, but I love your comment about starting with a net, because I remember when I first started going to Science of Mind, Church of Religious Science, back in the early 80s, and Edwin spoke to, it was a cast of thousands in the audience, and so I took a leap of faith, and I was, making so little money at the time. And I wrote out my check, I remember, for $63, and it scared the mud out of me. And I was shaking on serving all week. And finally, when the paycheck came, I realized that the whole month had gone by and I hadn't suffered a bit. And so I love the idea of starting with a net. That's wonderful. And I wanted to just add a second little shout out to thank Michael, is the name of the gentleman that abundantly blessed us with Subway sandwiches. And so for the money finders, I'm going to add the Subway sandwiches for it.
All right.
And I just wanted to plant a seed of thought with money finders. When I go to the grocery store, at the bottom of the receipt is how much money I've saved. So I jot that down. And when I go to the library, which I do every week, 5 or 6 books a week, I literally save hundreds of dollars every month practically. And on the receipt of the library, it tells me how much money I've saved. So all of these little wonderful serendipitous incomes happen, and it's all in your bank, staying there.
Excellent. Thank you, Beverly. Those are wonderful points. That's how, and she's been building this prosperity consciousness since she's the 80s, she said. So this is what happens. She's built it and she's successful and she's now retired and she's still noticing where the abundance and good shows up for her and acknowledging it. That's how it becomes ingrained and becomes a process for us. Anyone else? Alexander.
Science is a wonderful thing. It really is, because when I get fascinated about something, I often lean into not just spiritual work, but what science has to say about something, because science is the study of something. And the interesting thing about science is when it's studied, it changes. So if we use that as a metaphor for our own experience and journey, we're ever changing, which brings me to my point. According to my recent studies in neuroscience, in one particular area of growth, there's 2 different mindsets that we all possess working for us at all times. One is a fixed mindset, and the other is a mindset of growth. So this supports what Reverend Jill was saying today about our consciousness and our expansion for growth and how we feel about certain things, because neuroscience also is studying the power of our feelings and our emotional intelligence and how it works with our belief systems and what we deem to be true in our reality as we produce them, because it all falls into, is this flowing in a growth mindset or is this flowing into a fixed mindset? And interesting enough, through science, neuroscience specifically, the two are leaning back and forth in one another because we need both. We need a fixed mindset. For example, our subconscious is working to help us see, sense, breathe, walk, talk. We don't have to think about these things, right? But the growth mindset is our conscious perception of things, our observer effect. It's that wandering curiosity that brings other things into the scope of what expresses and expands within us. So to support the talk today, neuroscience is really showing how it believes in inspired living. And also, a narrative is important. So sometimes it doesn't matter what we call something, but narratives are how we live and how we're assessing things and gathering information and deciding whether or not it fits our fixed and growth mindsets and our belief system. So understand your narrative. What is it that you believe? What is it you say? What is it that you encourage? And know that through incremental changes, that this can change. Just taking a step in a different direction or a step towards something, or sometimes a step back from something, here again to support what is fixed and what is growing. And understanding that it's not one is greater than the other, it's working together. So that's how our prosperity is. When I'm working with my team, I'm thinking about what I see and what I feel and what's happening in the growth of it. And then that becomes fixed in truth, and then it grows again. So thank you for that. I just wanted to share what I've been recently studying through science.
Thank you. Wonderful. A growing edge. Absolutely. A growing edge. Time for one more. Anybody else? Lisa.
I'm going to borrow from Edwin Gaines, and I apologize if I don't quote it correctly. But the basic gist of her statement was 100% comes from God. Getting to keep 90 is a great business deal.
Exactly. All right. Good old Edwene. You can watch her on YouTube if you've never seen her. She's quite an interesting lady. All right. So let's pray about this. What do you think? Think that's a good idea? Yeah? All right. Let's go within. As we recognize this one power and presence that is God, it is the infinite source of all that is. It is the substance and source and supply. There is nothing outside of it. There's nothing beyond it. There's nothing before or after. It is all that there is. We see its opulence, its abundance, its prosperity demonstrated throughout all of its creation. And I know, claim, and accept in this moment that we see this expressed in ourselves, in, through, and as me, in, through, and as each one of us gathered here today and those listening online. Just knowing that we are prospered by this infinite source, this infinite intelligence, that all that we need, like the lilies of the field, like we have discussed, all that we need is here, available to us when we can surrender and trust and simply know that we live in a friendly universe, that all is provided, that all is well. I know that each of us is guided, guarded, and protected by this divine grace in which we live, that Spirit is ever giving to its creation, and that includes us. And so it's ever available to us, pressing against us, simply for us to say yes and receive. We talk about the universe always saying yes to us. We need to say yes to it. Just like Thoreau said, we need to say yes to it. We need to step in trust and in faith and simply say yes. And so I bless each one of us this day, knowing that anyone that has anything on their heart, as they lift it into this prayer and the consciousness of it, of this room and these many beloveds sitting here, I know that whatever needs to be healed or revealed is healed and revealed. I know that abundance flows. I know that creativity is expressed and divine ideas are flowing on a regular basis, and we are inspired and uplifted. God is good, and God's got this. And so it is with a grateful heart, filled with thanksgiving and joy for all of the abundance of good that comes to and through me and to and through each one of us and to and through this center, that I release this prayer into the action and activity of law, knowing that it is done. It is already so. There's nothing else to do. I let it go, and we affirm together, and so it is.